If the transfer window so far had a sense of the waiting game from an Arsenal perspective, possibly waiting for the new PSR cycle to restart in July to pull the trigger on Benjamin Šeško, or waiting for some more clarity on Rodrigo's situation at Real Madrid, then in the last few days or so, something has shifted. Arsenal are now looking to wrap up a deal for Valencia's 21-year-old Spanish centre-back Cristhian Mosquera very quickly now. And all for what looks about £15 million. Andrea Berta likes to operate in this sort of way. If his patterns at Atletico Madrid are anything to go by, he has more than one deal on the go at the same time. He conducts his business in short, opportunistic bursts when the time is right. Welcome back to the Harvey Gratian YouTube channel. I'm so glad you found us or are joining us once again. And today's video is going to scout Cristhian Mosquera and his move to Arsenal in detail as always. There are outrageous physical qualities that this player has, yes, but there's also a little trait that Mosquera has that I've found in his game that I think we are sorely lacking as a team. There are some real points of improvement for Mosquera too, but especially since I've spent sort of the last night watching his clips and 90-minute matches, there is so much, I think, for us to get our hopes up for in this deal. So let's dive into it. It's clear watching Mosquera that this is another player whose physical predispositions are pretty freakish. I want to hedge my bets here and say that already when it comes to channel defending or recovery sweeps, this guy is going to clamp down on almost every attacker. A lot of people have rightly cited Mosquera's aggressive tendencies, and they are absolutely correct. But for this point, I want to start actually on the patience that he has to his defensive game. In this example, Mosquera is actually caught a bit high out of possession, maybe being over-aggressive. But from here, I want you to focus on that recovery speed, how that ground is chewed up, but then, crucially, how he doesn't fly into ground with a lunging block. He stays on his feet, meaning when the attacker in Memphis Depay does check back, Mosquera's trailing leg can scoop the ball back. Let's turn to more typical channel defending now. Betis here launch a long ball forward, and when it drops for the attacker, he has all the momentum on Mosquera. But this is where I guess the Anthony Rudiger comparisons feel more apt, which, by the way, I don't think necessarily extend to Mosquera on his on-the-ball game that we'll talk about later. But look how Mosquera is essentially charging the runner down here. It's not graceful, but it's ridiculous ground coverage. He steals those yards back like it's nothing and then coolly turns out of pressure, something that he likes to do and something we as Arsenal fans have been accustomed to William Saliba doing on the regular. One more example though, and this got me really excited. Look how he dominates this duel without actually ever making an intervention. He's just so physically overwhelming, I think, in these scenarios that if he doesn't actually have to go to ground, he will just let an attacker run out of steam by themselves and then brush them out of the way like it's nothing. I think this translates to different scenarios too. Here we see him shifting from side to side with a burst to shut out Vinicius, and you'd be forgiven, I think, for thinking someone as leggy or with as much span, leverage and reach as Mosquera has, and assuming that he doesn't necessarily have the ability to shift direction sharply, but you'd be very, very mistaken. I've rarely seen Mosquera lose control of his legs, if that makes sense. They allow him to deal with awkward balls well, those medium to low height crosses into the box, and being that naturally aggressive, front-footed centre-back, you've always got a feeling one of those legs is going to steal the ball off you or poke it away when it's fired into the attacker. His ground duelling, globally, is ridiculously good, and defending the box at the front post, he is equally proactive. He anticipates aggressively and gets himself in between ball and man, or ahead of the man. And before we now move on to Mosquera in possession, as well as some of his limitations, the aerial duels for example, but why he actually struggles in this situation, I want to talk about first a detail he adds to Arsenal's defending that, yes, Arsenal, arguably Europe's most imposing and indomitable defensive outfit, are really poor at. That's blocking the ball. Now, incidentally, Gabriel may actually be the best in the league at this, but as a whole, the group of Arsenal players defending have a tendency to turn their backs, make themselves smaller when they're blocking a shot, not shutting off an angle as much as they should. For example, Son's goal at the Emirates this season, or Fabian Ruiz's in the Champions League, Pedro Neto's long-range strike. Trust me, I could go on. Mosquera blocks shots like Gabriel does, which tells you, I think, the assuredness and the confidence he has in his duelling and his physicality. Remember the first example that we used where he stayed on his feet, which means that if the attacker does make a quick, sharp change of direction, your trailing leg steals in. He doesn't shy away either, makes himself big, and, again, those legs of his, they can reach simply anything. He's just so hard to get away from. I don't think Mosquera has really been grasped or understood yet on the ball, though. I see someone who, yes, maybe isn't displaying a superpower of such yet, but I see a technical base with a lot of positive room for improvement. And there is room for improvement, sure, I agree. But I also see a suppleness or a deftness in some of his touches that immediately stood out as a feature to me. I think this starts to edge towards the weirdness, the good weirdness that is, to Mosquera's profile. We've seen him charge and stampede back towards his own goal, eating up the channels. But again, being 6'2" as opposed to 6'4", 6'5" on the ball, this allows him to play with a lot more little steps and touches than you might expect. It's sometimes actually think when we're comparing on and off ball, you're not actually watching the same player. That's what it feels like. This example comes up after he slid in powerfully to win a tackle. I'm not quite sure how clear this shows up on the screen, but it's so cool, I think, to see how he can just scoop the ball back onto the pitch. I think a feature to his in-possession game is his ability to change the angle. What do I mean by that? Well, whether he is playing on the left, right, or in the middle of Valencia's back three, he's often using his studs, keeping his head up, constantly adjusting and playing with his angles to manipulate that opposition first line of pressure. Like we said, against a really high press, he can spin out, turn fluidly, which is a really, really good sign. And then, with his passing, he has that around the corner pass with either foot pretty nailed. That cuteness, which almost is seemingly inessential, yes, but I think it's really valuable for sustaining clean possession, and this is a buy that Arteta will have seen this and known that, okay, this is a base I can work with. We'll get on to all of his current limitations and places for growth next, but it's interesting for me that at the moment he almost operates with more of the shiftiness of a timber when he's building up the ball, meaning when he does spring into that carry, which for now is an in-possession tool he's kept holstered, I think. Then, though, you are reminded suddenly that this is also the same guy that you see defending. He can take more risk with his dribbling, I think. Look here how he burst through a couple of pressers, and then, because of that shiftiness, he isn't stuck on the same line like some other really leggy, tall centre-backs. He drops a shoulder really well, like you actually have to remind yourself who you're watching. Right now, though, his biggest forms in terms of progression on the ball seem to be in the pass. He's not blessed with, from what I see, the purest or cleanest of strikes on a consistent basis. I think he would much rather punch a pass inside than ping a switch out to the underloaded far side. And that's especially if he's under pressure. But with that manipulative capacity, I'm going to say, and I should mention he's not ambipedal, Mosquera. He is fine, though, using either foot. And this helps him find those angles on those inside balls, breaking lines pretty well. He's got a lot of intention and a lot of purpose to play at a good tempo, which is a massive positive, even if, as of yet, we've not seen a ridiculous passing range or a volume to his carries. Right now, he's more of a base, a blank base to paint on. Let's do our due diligence, though, and speak about what's holding him back right now. After all, we've signed him for a depth piece and not for astronomical sums of money, despite having just 1 year left on his deal. I've mentioned the aerial struggles and hinted at some on-ball weaknesses amongst others. Let's start in the air, though, where his numbers are not just uninspiring, but you would say quite alarming for the profile I've just described for you guys. For me, this doesn't come down to any fundamental problems with his leaping or how confident he is at making himself imposing or nasty to play against. But watching how he deals with long balls, he really just is happy to fight the attacker on the ground. It's why he's so good at defending those tricky balls into the box. And he's a grappler, a wrestler, and he tries to stick to his man so then he can reach around with his legs, scoop or poke the ball away. In other words, I think he just knows how good he is battling on the floor, but you feel like if he was to come up against a Kai Havertz, he would make it really, really awkward for Mosquera if they came up against each other. Suddenly you've got this physical phenom not looking quite so freakish. How do you begin to coach this is the question though. You work, I think, on the timing of his jumps. I think he doesn't watch the ball as well as the man, and this can mean he gets stuck under it, maybe looking up to the sky too late, and he's just trying to knock the centre forward off balance instead. Those would be my 2 cents on that. And on the ball, those line cutters that we were speaking about, they can, if I'm honest, be really bouncy at times. Especially when he's rushed, Mosquera can hit it into an area that makes it pretty difficult for his teammates to take the ball under their control. In the same way, his first touch can be a bit bouncy at times, and he can take 1 or 2 touches longer to bring the ball under his control, where then on, he's absolutely fine. I mean, we've all seen the growth that Gabriel has made technically after his transfer from Lille, and Gabriel has spent time now in that central centre-back role situationally. He's developed also a nice hit into the channel for the left winger, and he's nailed that diagonal cutter from left to right. He squeezes high against deep defences, and with Mosquera's base, we can do this too, I think. So let's talk about the deal now, what it means from a squad building perspective, what holes it fills, and whether there are any tactical details of note. In short, Saliba's minutes for a 24-year-old over the past 3 seasons have been demanding, to say the least. This is a guy we simply cannot run into the ground. We cannot afford to do that. For this reason, you'd probably want, in fairness, Mosquera to have a little more of that ability to lead a back 3. That Saliba does. Mosquera has the cute adjustments, the spins out of pressure, and potential in the carry. But I think, as of now, that overall composure, or his touch and that passing range, he doesn't quite have that to make him the best deputy in that middle, that technical leader in the middle of the back 3 for now. However, partner him suddenly with a Calafiori at left centre-back and let Raya step through and take lots of those central centre-back touches that he does anyway. You've got Calafiori's gung-ho nature on the ball and Mosquera's ability to sweep in the vacated space behind him. Basically, I think there's a really good reason to see Saliba take some much more needed rest next season because of Mosquera. I also, and this comes with sad heart, but I think a correct decision from a game model perspective, this ends us planning with Tomiyasu in mind. We've got the right-sided cover which buffers White and Timber indirectly and frees up down the line a different kind of profile at left centre-back or left-back too when Miles moves into midfield and if Kivior is moved on. I mentioned White and Timber there. I tried to source some clips of Mosquera rushing on the outside in more typical overlappy right-back zones, and I could only find a couple of stray examples. He has the running power, he has that gait, but I have simply not seen enough of him in the final third to conclusively tell you whether that sort of hybrid role is more on the cards. My gut would be no, at least for now. This is a wide centre-back who has actually played mostly on the left of a 3 for Valencia, but is best at right centre-back, where he can completely shut down those right-hand-sided channels in behind, be nice and cute and always improving on the ball, and maybe add a couple of carries out from the back as well. To finish, I really like the signing, from a savviness and a depth and a perspective point of view, because this all comes with the assumption that with Kepa and Norgaard, who I will have a scouted on, by the way, coming for you, with those guys also through the door, along with Zubimendi, we're in the process, hopefully, of clarifying and readying the attack for those couple of big hitting forwards to get them through the door. If that's the strategy, it makes these more proactive yet still exciting deals in their isolation look even better. I've got a lot of content coming for you guys in the next week or so, so stay tuned. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. See you later.